She was the first one in the boardroom and often the only one who looked like her. Cassandra Crawley Mayo's journey from corporate leader to best-selling author began with a question. What if the greatest obstacle in my life was me? Years of success, accolades, and leadership masked a quieter battle, one with self-doubt, burnout, and the invisible barriers built from childhood and experience. But Cassandra's story isn't just about the glass ceiling. It's about breaking through the walls we build for ourselves and discovering the courage to live a life that's truly our own. My guest today believes that authenticity and transparency are the keys to living our best lives, especially for professional women. I'm Scott Allan, and you're listening to the Enlightened Life Podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the soul's journey, healing, and transformation. Let's begin.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I am
So-
really looking forward to our
My
conversation.
pleasure. Me too. Me too. You've said that authenticity and transparency are essential for professional women. What does that look like in real life, and why is that so hard to achieve?
Well, let me tell you what it really looks like in real life. When you're not authentic, it's kind of like you're like a facade. That's when the imposter syndrome comes in and the self-imposed barriers because I'm unable to be myself. And as you indicated in the beginning, how I was the only African American female in the boardroom. So therefore, it was stereotypical of many of the men. I was in the room with a lot of white men, and I felt that I had to be different, fit in and say the right things and do what they did and wear the black and white suits and all of that. So it was just very difficult to be who I was created to be. It was very hard for me. So that's what I mean about lack of authenticity. People can see it, I can feel it. And a lot of that had to do
Yeah,
with my burnout, my self-imposed
of
barriers, because
course.
I'm trying to be something that I am not.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny talking about self-imposed barriers. Some people might think that sort of lets organizations off the hook, for systemic issues. So how can you balance, your personal empowerment with the need for that structural change?
Well, if I wanted to thrive and not just survive, I came to a point where, later on in my career, I was like, you know what? I was stressed. I was mentally exhausted. And that was back in the time when you didn't talk about mental health. That was
Sure.
taboo. And you just couldn't talk about it. But I looked great on the outside. I performed well. But on the inside, my stomach was churning and churning and churning. And it was just so difficult because that was not who I was. So that's kind of my story, but I'm grateful that I did well because I always thought I had to do better than anybody else. I had to work harder. I had to prove that I was an individual that could do the job. I wasn't in the job because of my color, and that was difficult.
Well, and look, here we are. It's still like this in 2025. I don't know if it's got any better. I'm not a black woman, but but I got to tell you, it's not easy. We can see it in our elections. We can see it in jobs. It's tough. It's tough to get your foot in and get a leg up, so to speak. Really.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why I said it's time to get out of your way so that you can move forward and do what you are here ordained to do in this life.
And I think a lot of people can use that advice. I know you're geared towards, empowering women, but honestly, imposter syndrome's a real thing, and I've dealt with it. A lot of people have dealt with it. I think we can all use some guidance to help get out of our own way, because otherwise we stand in the way, of real
Exactly.
success. Can you share something, maybe going back to your early childhood or career, that shaped your beliefs about success and self-worth?
Well, in my childhood, I grew up with under both of my parents. My dad worked in the post office. My mom was a teacher. And my mom would say that's all they could do. She could only teach or be a nurse. But what I also saw, they were very hard workers. They were like, if you're not on time, you're late. So you want to be on time. You want to be there like 15 minutes before your start time. You want to work
Hmm.
hard. You have values. You want to do the right thing. You want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. Although, they like to say the sky's the limit, but they were aware that there was a roadblock in my way, that it would be tough. And I grew up in the time of civil rights movement. And I really had a rude awakening when I graduated and it was relocated to Birmingham, Alabama. And my faith helped so much because I grew up in the church. My grandfather was a minister. We went to church every
Boy.
Sunday. And if didn't go to church, my grandfather would come over and say, "Well, you guys sick or what's going on?" Didn't realize my faith had so much to do with where I am today, because if it were not for the faith that I had, I would have I always say I wouldn't even be here. I would plummet. I would already minimize myself. I already couldn't be who I was created to be. But that part of my life helped me. And then my parents were role models because they were treated in a certain way. But I saw how they responded. So my behavior came a lot from my parents.
Did your faith play a part in your book?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why would enable me to use that title, because Scott, I have been wanting to write a book forever. Always wanted to write a book, but it was something that I just could not do it. Every time I'd sit down and try to do it, I'm like, nah, who wants to read my book? I don't want to tell my story. I don't want to be exposed. So I really, really struggle with that. And when you talk about my faith, it was like I could not let it go. It burned in my stomach. That fire was burning every year. Someone said, "What about the book? What about the book?" I'm like, "God, will you leave me alone? Could you leave me alone?" And he did not let me go until I made the decision by his grace and mercy to sit down and write that book. And that's when I found out that I was in my way. There was no other reason why I couldn't write the book. It was me. It was all about me. It wasn't about anybody
It's all
else.
about you.
It was me.
I'm curious though. I'm thinking of you growing up, in the church, in your community, and I don't know where you grew up, but I wonder sometimes if, and I don't know that you were necessarily isolated, but when we talk about being isolated in your community, influenced by the civil rights movement, were you a trendsetter? Or in other words, I almost feel like there's comfort in what you know and the people around you. Like this is just, did you find those people that would say, but this is who we are. This is how we have to adjust because this is how life is. Were you the one that sort of stepped out of that and they said, what is that girl doing? Or were they all, did you have that kind of people around you that said, go, go, go and pushed you on?
Well, I would consider myself a trailblazer. And the
Hmm.
reason I say that, because during the civil rights movement, we had not integrated schools. And during that time, it was like a study that the administration decided, that the education board, that, I think we should integrate now. And so it was like a test. So my mom was selected because she was known as one of the better teachers. So they selected her to go far away to teach at an all white school. And I could hear the
Really?
rumbling and talking with her girlfriends and my dad where she had to go. And of course she agreed. She needed a job. But guess what? When she went to that school, I didn't volunteer. She voluntold me that I was going with her.
Voluntold you.
Yeah, she
Wow.
voluntold me because she said, "I do not want you home alone because I have a distance to drive, and I would get back and you would be home by yourself, and that's something that I don't want from you." And so I went to school with her. My mom, myself, the janitors, and the cooks were the only African Americans in that school from first through sixth grade. I started going there in the sixth grade. And boy, was that a rude awakening. So things started happening. And I say all of this was ordained because I always said God knew my future. He knew my ending before my beginning. So in
Mhm.
other words, I was being prepared for that. I felt I was in a safe place because my mom was there. And I would get these names,
Yeah.
the guys would call me these different names and everything. But then there was a group of individuals who really liked me. They would invite me over their home. They would have me for dinner. We would have pajama parties and we would have all of that kind of stuff. So when all of that happened, I made a decision that, you know what, when I graduate from high school, I want to go to a historical Black college. I want to know what it's like to be around people that look like me, act like me, have a behavior like me. And when I did do that, I felt so comfortable because I was around individuals that looked like myself. And it was just
Yeah.
a great experience. And so and of course, when I graduated from college, I went to Birmingham, Alabama. And every position that I was in, I was the first African American female in an executive role, every position throughout my life. So
Really?
that's why I said my childhood
Wow.
and all that prepared me for that.
So, how did you recognize the imposter syndrome and the burnout in yourself? When did that creep in?
But Scott, in the beginning, I didn't recognize it. I remember when I was hired to be the first African American female to be a general manager at a Marriott hotel. It was a Marriott Courtyard. And I was so naive. When I went there, I was like, this is my hotel. I'm going to work like it's my hotel. I'm going to run it like it's my hotel. And then as you are surrounded by different people, your employees, the guests, that's when I started saying, you know what? I'm different. And that's why I'm being treated like this. I'd have guests come out and say, they wanted to see the general manager. And when I walked out, just not their expression, but the things they would say to me said, oh my gosh. So that's when the imposter started coming because I had to recalibrate on things I said, that the stereotype, like she's going to act like this and she's going to act like an angry Black woman. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm gonna be me. And so that's why I believe I had those experiences. And then it started as I got older, more mature, more experienced. That's when I started thinking, I can't do this. I'm a fraud. They're gonna think that, and so therefore I worked long hours. I worked hard to prove that I could do the work that I was hired to do. So that's when I discovered, and you know what? That created a lot of stress. That created burnout
Of course.
because I couldn't be me.
Yeah. Yeah. Some people might say too that to anyone I'm talking about now that's in that kind of a role that, they might say that self neglect is just part of the job. So, what do you say to women who feel that they don't really have a choice but to deal with that?
Well, the best way that I can say that comes a lot out of my book is Your Way in Your Way. It's a self discovery guide for women on how to restore yourself, learn from the experiences that you've had, and be your true self again. And therefore, from that part, after I wrote the book, finally, I'm like, oh, finish the book, I'm done. And I felt in my spirit that God says, no, you're not. You have to show people, create, which I have a signature program that will help women to start. These are the women that are exhausted, burnout, to show them that you can start living your life, best life on your terms. And let me share with you how you do it because I wasn't living my best life. So am just when I see individuals, men, um, trying to do something, make something out of their life, do something with their life, that brings me joy. When people are
As
stuck and
well.
have all these limiting beliefs, that bothers me because I want them to live a life. I want them to have a purpose fulfilled life while they're here because life is so short.
Sure is. Sure is. You've led efforts to recruit and promote African American leaders. So, what are some of the biggest challenges and maybe even opportunities when it comes to diversity and leadership that you've realized?
Well, right now, I think the challenge is this administration has made a decision not to have any diversity and inclusion programs. And to me, that's a challenge because if it were not for those programs, I would not have been hired in my roles. And that means all of them. And as a result of that, in the jobs that I were in, we started diversity and inclusion programs, and I was the chair of the African American group. And because I say I was a trailblazer, because I was the first to get in, and it gave others people an opportunity to see It wasn't about our race. We are actually qualified to do what we are hired to do. So that
Yes.
gives individuals an opportunity. We wouldn't get
Yes.
it
And
if
that's
it weren't
exactly what I was
done.
going to say.
Yes,
That's what I was just going to say. People need to understand that it is not that you were not qualified. You were qualified
yes,
and maybe even more qualified than some of the others, but it helped you get your foot in the door and get that opportunity. That's why I think this whole dismantling of DEI is just terrible,
I do
just
too.
awful,
I do too.
just awful.
Right.
So yeah, your experience as the first and only in so many of the rooms, how did that impact your sense of self and how did you overcome some of those feelings of isolation at the time?
Wow. If people knew the stories, boy, do I have so many stories of how I was treated
Yeah.
unapologetically, what people would say to me, how I would handle that. Do I let human resources be aware of having someone get so angry with me that they threw a chair across the room? Things like that. I'm like, this is crazy. Even individuals, my colleagues, would talk about me to the senior executives that I was not qualified to do the job that I do. And what was interesting about it, it went full circle. It was kind of like there's a saying in the Bible that the Lord said, I'll make your enemies your footstools. And there were after times where I was in an organization and we had problems, and I was always selected to go in and turn things around. So therefore, I was like, wow, I was like a problem solver. If anything happened, and these were individuals that talked about me that had accounts, they needed me to go in and help them fix that account so they would not lose that account. And you know what? I did a lot of praying. I also had a mentor.
Yeah.
I had a coach, and that was very helpful because you can't do anything on your own. And it's just good to what I call a board of directors, my personal board of directors, individuals in my community that could help me with certain things so that I could maintain my sanity, so to speak, And that's when I talked about, that's why I'm so big on this burnout. And that's why my signature program is called the Rise Journey. And it's called the signature is the Rise Journey, but my program is Let's Rise Beyond Limits. And that is so important to me because I want people to know that we all are here for a reason. Why aren't we doing what we want to do, feel led to do, but yet we're stuck? What is that all about? So it's time to
Yeah.
get unstuck, start living your life, start living your dash. Your dash, you were born
That's
this year,
it.
right? You got to start living it. That's critical for you to start having a fulfilling life.
Live your dash. I like that. It's true.
Yes,
It's
that's right.
true. You know, so for people who are listening, can everyone really pivot to a purpose-filled life, or is that privilege?
That's a great question. Everybody living can live a purpose filled life if they want to, if they're realizing that they cannot do it by themselves, if they know the right person, if they find the right mentor or the right coach, or it's kind of like if you are sick and tired of being sick and tired. It gets to a point where how you look strong on the outside, but in the inside, you're just unraveling, you're stagnant. Everybody has that opportunity because everybody that was born is born for a reason. And if in fact you see individuals that are in a good space, they're doing well, they're doing what they want to do. A lot of people are miserable, particularly now. They're really struggling with life. And you get to a point where, like, why am I here? I used to say that. Why am I here? Am I here to go through all this drama and trauma in my life? Why?
Yeah.
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 So what practical steps can you give for women who want to break through their own barriers but really don't even know where to begin?
Well, one of them, I'm going to talk about my program a little bit, which is called
Yeah.
which I talked about, the Rise Beyond Limits. And one of the things that I talk about, and it's an acronym. First of all, the acronym for RISE is to recognize, the R is to recognize. I always say you can't heal what you can't name. So there's a reason why you are stuck. And furthermore, in doing the recognition, what are two things, personal and business, that you like to do? What is it that you like to do? If you want to live your best life on your terms, what is that? So we kind of go through that part and the recognize part, and then we do the interrupt. What is when you can't interrupt, that will continue to run your life. For example, social media is an addiction. I know people that are on social media all the time. They can't get anything done. So we go through
It's
what do we need to do to interrupt that pattern because that's not serving you. And that's the then you go to the S and we talk about surrendering. What aren't you not surrendering? Why are you trying to control something that you cannot? Let it go. And that's where I bring in the divine, the God, whoever people
hmm
serve, the universe. Let's kind of talk about that. And then once we get all of that done, then you start embracing what it is that you want to accomplish. It's time to embrace it. And then we build on what it is that you decided that you wanted to do. That's the beyond. And then it's time to launch. It's a 6-month program. But the first thing that I always say is you need, like, you know what, Scott, I do a lot of book tours. And I remember I asked people, if I gave you a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, and I ask you, are you living your best life on your terms right now? And 1 to 10's the highest, tell me what that is. And people sit up there like, I never thought about that. Or the people that have
Yeah.
avoidance issues say, oh, I'm a 10. But people who really, that's why I do what I call purpose driven. So there's a certain
hmm
audience, certain clients that I'm inclined to work with. Because if you don't want to do it, I don't want to waste your time or waste their time. So I always
Beautiful.
say, if this is something you want to do, and there are a lot of people out there doing, but I just, a lot, and I call myself a transformational mentor, not a coach. It's time for you to
Yep.
transform and be the person that God created you to be.
And for people wondering, do you only mentor women
I
or
do.
do you have male clients? You
I
only
have
mentor women. So that's good to
only,
know.
and that's interesting you said that because lately I do a podcast as well. And the
hmm
podcast is Your Way in Your Way. And I have had more men in the last month that would love to be on my podcast because they think that, well, they believe they have something to share why they believe women are in their way. So I thought that was interesting. And I may do that maybe for a month, but right now my
Yeah.
audience are women.
Yeah, that's all right. But that's good for people to know that are sitting here listening, you know. Can you share a story maybe of some transformation that occurred with someone you've mentored?
Yes, absolutely. But I have a young lady whom she had this thing like, I want to be like you because you've done this. And I'm like, no, you don't, sweetheart. You don't want to be like me because if you want to go through what I've been through. And I don't think that's something that you want to do. So let's sit down and let's kind of talk about what is it that you want to do. And one of the things she wanted to do was move up in her career. She was not in a good place. And a lot of people, like, if you have to move up and you can't move up there, let's go somewhere else. Let's identify what it is that you really wanted to do. And she wanted to work in the human resources arena. And I'm like, okay, so we kind of work towards that. And now she is an executive on the West Coast doing a lot of good things. And she says that she owes it all to me in the program. And the thing about even though I'm in a program, but she'll check with me every now and then when she's having some challenges to ask me certain things about what she's experiencing on her job with her colleagues.
So just pivoting just a little bit, I'd like to just quickly talk about the support systems and how do you help women build these support systems and why is that important as they're
Yeah.
going through their
For
challenges?
example, I like individuals, number one, in their support system to have accountability partners. Somebody they trust, somebody they believe in, that has their best interest at heart. So what they share with them stays with them. It's like Vegas. Whatever you do in Vegas stays in Vegas. The other thing that I support individuals with is finding a finance person. a financial advisor. And there are a lot of them out there, but you definitely want to make sure that you are secure in the things you do. A lot of people like, well, I don't have the money. But when you look at and see what they're spending their money on, of course you don't. You don't
Yeah.
have to buy Starbucks every day. You don't have to have all these cable channels. So I do that. And then I encourage them to find what I call a spiritual person, somebody who believes in what they believe in. So stay connected with that. And that's kind of what I have. So I'm sharing things that I have. I also have an attorney in my circle. When I'm having some legal issues, some things going on, I have an attorney that I fall back on. Also, and I always say never underestimate the relationships you have. You have a lot of relationships. What is it that they can do to help you and vice versa? I also say have a friend, a good friend that keeps you grounded. I say somebody to keep it real.
Yeah.
So those are the five things that I encourage people to have. And I have all those things. I have my accountability partner. We speak every Wednesday. We set out our goals that we want to do, and then we follow up every week on how we're doing. We set that up, and just at every quarter, then we figure out, well, where are we with this goal? So that's when I talk about a support group, your
Yeah.
community.
Perfect. What's your vision for the next generation of women leaders? And is there anything organizations can do to support that?
Yeah, well, my vision is to empower a generation of women to mitigate those barriers that are preventing them from living their best life on their terms. I deal with church groups, corporations, women groups, also mentoring programs, and I just continue. And I'm also a speaker, so I network and build my community. It's not just the five, but just individuals. I always follow up, stay in touch if I feel that we have a commonality. And that's what I do. And I always say my vision is who I touch every day, what I do, all of that to me is my legacy. I want to make a difference in everybody that I speak with.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice. So for anyone listening who feels stuck or overwhelmed, what's the first thing you'd want them to hear?
You can get unstuck. You don't have to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yes, there is a way to be, and I can say that because I've been there. I'm qualified to say that because that's where I've been. I always say you can't tell me anything if you've not been there. So I get it.
Yeah. I'd like to give you an opportunity to share anything that's on your heart, whether it's a story, a message, or a practice you'd love listeners to try.
Yeah. This is something that if you are ready to start living your best life on your terms, when you are ready, and I always say, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. So think about that. If you're ready, that's the only time when somebody will appear, and to be open to it. So that's what I'll say. So within your heart, okay, I'm ready, and stuff will start happening. Put it out.
Start happening.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, your insights, and your mission with us. And for listeners who want to learn more, you can find Cassandra's book, Is Your Way in Your Way, on Amazon, and connect with her through her speaking and mentoring and organizational partnerships, and on her website, CassandraCrawley.com, and that's CRAWLEY. And as always, you can visit my website at mediumscottallan.com to book a reading, check out my upcoming live events, or listen to other episodes of the Enlightened Life Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and remember, living your best life begins with believing you're worthy of it. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.